What I like to talk about now are pings and stingrays as they relate to Timothy Charles Holmseth and Fied McConnell. Now, it might behoove some of you out there to remember a while back when there was a couple mystery callers to Fiad McConnell, or a couple of mystery calls, I should say. And also the fact that Fiad McConnell gets telephone calls. Now, enter into the picture a couple terms. First term is a stingray. What is a stingray? Stingray is a little gadget made by the Harrison Communications Company that is used by law enforcement and intelligence people to monitor certain cell phones. It's a tool for surveillance, covert surveillance. Now, as usually the case, non-law enforcement individuals or civilians have been known to get their hands on these little gadgets, or else, because of their knowledge of the technology, make their own versions of the stingrays. Now, what can you use a stingray for? Well, remote surveillance is a key here. You can use the stingray to keep track of certain cell phones. And if somebody, for instance, wanted to find out where Tiothy Holmseth is, they would use a stingray to do it. Now, it would help if you had Tiothy Holmseth's telephone number. It would be a good idea to have Tim Holmseth's telephone number. It's also a good idea to have Fiad McConnell's telephone number, but you don't necessarily have to have either one. This is one of the strengths of a stingray. Say you know the telephone calls over the cell phone system are originating from a fixed location. In this case, it would be the residence of Fiad McConnell. Or it could be a motel where a party's being held. Or it could be a courthouse where a trial is supposed to be held. A lot of data can come out of the fact that you know that Fiad McConnell is on his telephone. And some of the data you would learn is the telephones that are coming into Fiad McConnell. People making calls to Fiad McConnell and Fiad McConnell making calls to other people. The stingray can help you with this information. Okay. So we go down to Fiad McConnell's house with a portable stingray. And we wait we check. See if the phone is active. He's getting calls. You can figure out who he's getting calls from. So on and so forth. This brings us to the next subject of pings. Now, a ping, as it relates to cell phones, is a signal that's sent to and from the cell phone towers that the cell phone communicates on. It's a geolocation. You can use pings in law enforcement to determine where somebody has been, or, in this case, where somebody is. But okay. Let's say you don't know what phone Tiothy Holmseth is using. So without knowing what telephone Tiothy Holmseth is using, it's hard to know where Tiothy Holmseth is. Which brings me to the subject of the mystery caller. Field McConnell gets his call from the mystery caller. His phone pings. So we know that he's getting a phone call. So now we can get the pings from the person that's calling Field McConnell to find out where Field McConnell is, because this is one thing. Stingrays and devices similar to Stingrays can do this. They can hook onto the other phone, just like you're tapping into a landline between two different phones and figure out who's calling from where, or at least where the phone is calling from. Remember back in the old days of the movies where they keep the person on the line for as long as they can so that they can trace the call. Stingrays and devices like them make this process a lot quicker and a lot simpler. You can have a geolocation on multiple telephone calls in seconds. You don't need to hold the person on the phone for a limited period of time to get the trace. It's instantaneous. In the case of the mystery caller, Tiothy Charles Holmseth, this is where we finally figure out for certain that Tiothy Holmseth is in Field McConnell's home. Because when you do a ping back on a phone that is calling Field McConnell as a mystery caller, and the call is coming from Field McConnell's house to Field McConnell in his house, it's quite obvious that the mystery caller is calling from the room next door. Because of the pings, because of the technology behind devices like the Stingray. And so, based on the information that I have received, Tim Holmseth is in Field McConnell's house. He's been there all along. There was communications between Holmseth and Field McConnell while the two of them were in East Grand Forks. They talked to each other quite often up until the day that Tim Holmseth disappeared, and within a day or two of Tim Holmseth being in the residence of Field McConnell's house. I have to say alleged to all this because it's secondhand information, but I'm familiar with the equipment. I'm familiar with who's operating the equipment, and I can almost say for certain, with 95% assurance, that Tim Holmseth is being assisted by Field McConnell in staying out of jail. Whether or not this will lead to the arrest of either or both of these individuals is hard to say. But at least now we know for certain where Tim Holmseth is and how he got where he is. This is William K. Murtaugh, a.k.a. Witness 1. Have a good one.